Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our first ever LinkedIn Live in a series of bi-weekly events that we'll be hosting, where we focus in on all things game-based learning and pick on the hot topics in the learning and development world right now. We're coming to you live from our London office here at Attensi. Thank you to everybody that's joined live. But remember, if you're watching this recorded, I've got an invitation for you straight away. And that invitation is if there's something you'd like to hear more about or look into, or maybe even come into the office and be part of the show, drop me a DM or drop us a note in the comments and we'd love to have your involvement. Each event, I'm going to be joined by a superstar game changer and actually have one of the best here today, Max, with us. Max, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure thing. Thank you very much, Dean, and thank you for placing the trust in me on this inaugural
I know, right?
session. No pressure. So I am a Senior Business Development Director at Attensi. I specialise in our pubs and restaurant sector. And I came across us about 2.5 years ago. I've been working in tech and SaaS for about 10 years. And I was looking around for something that I could get excited and motivated by. And when I remember seeing Attensi, just kept stumbling across them and thinking, wow, you can learn your job by playing games. That sounds really cool, right? And I was hooked straight away, and it's been a wonderful journey. Since we started, I've been able to work with the likes of Honest Burgers, Pizza Express, Fuller's, and to name a few. And effectively, my role now is to go around to the hospitality industry and shout loud and proud about what game-based learning is and what it could do for businesses in the future.
Amazing, and thank you for stepping up to the plate and being part of our first live session. So Max, we're gonna talk a little bit about that kind of game-based learning versus what's gamification. It might seem like a bit of an abstract term or splitting hairs, but could you help our kind of watchers and people watching this on record kind of, how would you define those two terms and what do they mean?
Yeah, definitely. Gamification's, everyone kind of is familiar with what it is, and it's a huge buzzword in the industry. Game-based learning, not so much. It's a bit of a mouthful. Kind of, playing games for your job. What does that mean? So, if we start with the main differences in short is it's the style of learning versus the output of the learning. And if we start with gamification and why is that such a big buzzword? Why has that taken over L&D in the last 10 years? The main reason is because people had a challenge with their old style of learning. L&D has become more and more and more important. Particularly, we have to retain staff. We have to train them up. The challenges were that the way that people train those people is predominantly really dull and boring. Long e-learning courses, videos, PDFs. You have to go through the whole thing and you do a quiz at the end. It's really dull. It's really engaging. People on autopilot, and they're just not getting competent. They're just not getting confident quick enough, and they're leaving. So what gamification's allowed them to do is let's gamify the output. So you do the still same line learning, but we put you in leaderboards. We give you some prizes. We give you some points, and then you can compete against your colleagues, your friends, your bosses. And that in itself is still really, really powerful, really, really important. It adds this kind of social element to it. We know certainly in our space in hospitality, people are very competitive, but in all of the industries we work with. And it does drive that repetition and engagement a little bit more. But the challenge is you're still only gamifying the output. You are not changing the style of learning. Effectively, you're only focusing on the destination and not the journey people are going on in their learning and development.
Makes sense. So that journey we kind of allude to. So I think that's a really important point. So game-based learning, there's a journey that the learner goes on versus like gamification being like the output. So I've a big tick, I've a trophy, I've completed my training and I move on. But can you talk to us about that journey a little bit?
Yeah, and I think that's the point, right? You want people to enjoy learning. People. I think that's the phrase, right? People hate to be taught to, but they love to learn. So how can we do that? How can we create some excitement and some passion around that process so they actually engage with the content? And that's what learning by gameplay is. That's what playing games are. And it's not just to have fun and to excitement. There's a lot of psychology that goes behind it. So if you look at the type of learning that it's trying to transform, traditionally that old way of learning is quite passive. I watch, I read, I listen. I'm not learning by doing. It's very, very much passive. Now we know the best way to learn is face to face, hands on. Let's get into the midst of it and try to learn what we need to master. So our job is, okay, how can we translate that into a game which gets people's their knowledge and their enthusiasm, and gets them to put things into practice and learn by doing, learn by failing, what we call active learning.
Yeah.
So if you think about the games that we all played throughout our lives, so kids, when you're building blocks, when you're learning sports for the first time, the console games that a lot of kids are always playing, even patterns and Candy Crush on mobile phones, even to older people playing memory games. What you're doing there is you're solving puzzles. You're challenging yourself. You're developing a skill, and you're doing it over and over again until you get mastery of that skill. And so that's, again, this kind of the science behind it, which I'm sure I'll talk to a little bit in a bit more detail soon. But that's the kind of mechanics that you can use by game-based learning that starts to take it to the next level.
Yeah, makes sense. And who'd have thought you could learn and have fun at the same time? Those two not normally marrying up in traditional training. I know myself in my years in retail, very much that kind of ticking a box and completing and moving on, whereas the memory retention not being there.
Yeah.
But the ability for us to be able to put people into those real life scenarios, which I'm sure you're going to touch on again very shortly. So Max, tell us, so game-based learning, what makes it unique?
Yes, a really good point. I think the main thing about it is establishing a connection with the content and making people care. We hear so much, certainly in my space in hospitality operators, is I want to try this learning culture. I want people to want to learn and drive their own self-development. And that's where you need to focus on how you're teaching them, not just what you're teaching them. That's where you need to focus on the style. And so if we think about what gaming is and what we boils down to, as I said, it's this fun environment where people are repeating a skill over and over again until they achieve mastery. So if we can take the best part of that and match it with bite-sized learning, what's the impact going to be?
Yeah.
And for those viewers who don't know much about Attensi, that's the kind of journey and the mission we're on. We build bespoke games that help people get better at their jobs. So in the same way that a pilot can learn how to fly a plane in a plane simulation, why can't you teach any job in a simulation? You want to simulate the real world experience. You want to put people in a scenario where they have to solve puzzles and they have to think about, okay, how do the rules of this game work? And when we start a project, we always work backwards and think, okay, what's the behavior change that we want to see?
Absolutely.
And that's, again, we're talking about this journey, which is really, really important because you need to make people care. So is that, we're trying to improve people's knowledge of allergens so we can improve customer safety. Is it we need to deliver better guest value and a guest experience? So can we increase and improve people's knowledge of the menu and their confidence in interactions? And then we'll go away and build those games.
So you're talking much more about less of the functional kind of this is how you do something. It's more of this is how you do something.
And it's also about the kind of the why, and I think that's really important. So we want to make it accessible. It has to be bite-sized. You can do it on your mobile, do it on desktop or laptop. So really put the power in people's hands. And again, a good game should follow like a storyline. There should be a narrative. There should be characters, and this is what we want to do. We want to simulate the real world experience, and in the real world, bad stuff happens sometimes. Mistakes happen.
It's hard to practice, right?
Exactly. For the best will of the world, people don't love role plays in action.
Really?
It's a bit cringy. It's a little bit awkward sometimes. You don't want to get things wrong in front of your boss. If you're the boss, you don't want to get things wrong in front of your employee. So what we'll do is we'll simulate high pressure environments. Now that might be working on an oil rig, or it might be dealing with a really difficult customer or a difficult employee. And we'll put people in this scenario where they have to try and fail, learn and see the power and the difference of their consequences. So again, this is doing a lot of kind of psychological mechanics in terms of getting people to care about the content, be involved and be immersed in the experience. That's what we need to do. We need to immerse them and make it feel real. But it's doing a lot of neurological things as well. It's we're not saying read this PDF and then go and test yourself that way. We're saying you don't need to have any prior knowledge. Learn the skills in this game. So I've got to work out how the game works. I've got to work out the rules. I've got to work out what's it trying to teach me and how do I get better and how do I practice. And that's how people achieve mastery. That's why people come back in. The leaderboards and competitions are fantastic. We know that's really, really important. but that will only get you to a certain level.
They're almost the drivers to get you to play, but not.
Well, they exactly that. They might be the drivers to compete, but if you're still learning in a passive way, you're not engaging with the content in a more deliberate way. You're not having to think. You're not having to fire up the neurons in your brain to work out how do I solve this game. And as I said, look, the process is they're having fun. They're enjoying this game. It's a lot more enjoyable. They're gonna be more likely to do it more often. But in the process, they're having a better knowledge retention because they're more engaged, and that's where you really start to see it take off.
Yeah, it makes sense. Max, I know something we've talked about a lot, and again touched on it briefly in what you said so far. But we often talk about everything you've just talked to, actually, but how it kind of evokes, or almost plays, but evokes on emotion. Can you touch on what that looks like a bit more?
Yeah, I think again, it's one of those hardest things to do. How do you motivate people to change? And we can really dial those up in simulated games. We can really create scenarios. So we've worked with charities where we've had to practice scenarios of dealing with kids who've been in difficult abuse situations, and you have to learn how to use questioning and empathy to help them feel comfortable and open up.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, and we do a lot of leadership solutions where we know that it's quite difficult having some of those difficult conversations, particularly if it's if it's a coaching situation, having to deliver feedback, but even if it's even more serious, having to be in a disciplinary and put people on performance plans, people kind of shy away from that, and it's really difficult to just teach the theory and then practice it and learn by doing and put it into practice. And so I think by creating this storyline, putting your own brand, your own tone and feel, your own identity into these games, it then makes the learner again immerse in that experience and go, okay, this is built specifically for me. This isn't just something off the shelf. This isn't just something generic. This is something I can really connect with. And once you get that into connection, that's where you get them to see them actually wanting to learn more, coming to you for more content, playing it more often, playing it more frequently, and actually, like I said, enjoying it. So if we can do that, then we're confident we're going to get them to the destination. But it's about how they learn, like I said, and not just what they learn.
And then effectively kind of did a little bit of almost my attempt, a little bit of a kind of summary for the people watching, but some of the points you touched on, the key one for me, which I know I love this statement so much, but that safe environment. So we're creating based on the customer's needs, but their brand and built bespoke. We're then creating for that learner effectively a safe environment for them to get things wrong. Is that right?
Yeah, if you think about the role play of games, the games is what do you do in games? You play and you fail more often than not. You learn from your mistakes.
I definitely do.
Exactly. When you're playing with your kids and you're probably letting them beat you at Monopoly or things like that, or even Connect Four. I probably doubt you're very good at Monopoly, Dean. That's why
we cut it.
But I think again, this is so important for psychological safety. And putting people in a game takes away some of the pressure of I've got my manager overlooking me, or I've got to practice this on a new colleague, or I don't get a chance to practice until that difficult customer is shouting at me. And I think it's a real mind shift change. It's one of the ones we work with customers really on a lot to help them, assure them that this isn't going to frustrate or overwhelm. But if you open up people to the possibility of learning by failing, and it's okay to get things wrong, you can practice and practice. That's again where people start to open up and try out different scenarios. And again, it comes back to these simulated scenarios that we build and we talk about. They need to be nuanced. They need to feel real lifelike. So again, people can build confidence, because so many people coming into the hospitality industry now, and I hear it every day, certainly since the pandemic, they might be lacking in that confidence. They might be lacking in those social skills, that the understanding of why it's important to smile or make eye contact.
Definitely.
And therefore the customer interactions are not as powerful as they could be. So let's put them in scenarios where they can actually practice that in their own space, in their own time in a game, and put them in that safe space. That's again how we're going to build up their confidence, and then they're going to exude that in real life.
I suppose just popped in my head is really listening to you just talk then, that's really how we support the speed to competence, right? I mean, that hospitality model of of I've a certain amount of experience and I'm coming straight into role and you're hit, right? I know from experience of, many years ago as a young lad, if you're hit by, you've got so much stuff to learn and bang, you're out in front of the customer. And that's where we're really supporting that speed to competence. So Max, I know you've been with us now for just over a couple of years, but I'd love to ask you a more personal question, but still obviously very work. Something that you're really proud of that you've, because I know you speak to customers on a weekly, new customers, existing customers. Something you're really proud of.
Yeah. It's a long list of things to select from, because when you take someone from having to learn about their job by watching the most dull video or read the longest PDF and do a quiz, and then you can get them to play a game, those visceral reactions you see are really cool. And I'm so proud that we can actually, again, make learning fun and have it see a real impact. But the best example of kind of like a day-to-day example that really stood out for me was we had a client who was testing our platform, and what I really wanted to measure was how it's going to land with neurodiverse learners. And it's a bit of a preconception as well that, a lot of and they are increasing in the workforce, but people that have ADHD, maybe autism, things like that gaming actually might have the opposite effect, because gaming comes with all this sensory satisfaction overloads, like, colors, prizes, sounds, points are all flashing out at me. That might be a bit overwhelming. Now, overall in the testing across their base of people who are neurodiverse, it was actually the complete opposite. These learners have really struggled with school. They've really struggled with long, passive content, and it's mostly to do with attention spans, but they're just not engaged and they can't focus. And by and large, everyone said, I actually really like this style of learning. It got me hooked. It got me engaged. It didn't feel like learning. And that's powerful in itself. But the one that stood out for me, there was a girl who had Tourette's. And again, she said, hated going to school, always felt like the dumbest in the class, couldn't keep up with the pace. But when she played our games, she felt safe. She felt comfortable. It didn't feel like she was back at school. So much so that her tick stopped. Her tick was personified in her shoulder, going repeated, and she can't typically stop it. And she said after the end of the game, she noticed her tick. She didn't feel her tick. She hadn't noticed it for the duration of playing the games. And apparently, she said that's a really big thing for her. So really being able to show that, forget about knowledge or forget about skill, but you've actually had a direct impact in someone's well-being and day-to-day life. That was phenomenal. So I love telling people that story.
No great surprise that story comes to mind. And I know we talk a lot, Max, we all do, around, having impact, having real world impact and having impact with people and helping them grow to be exceptional. But I think a really, truly great example there of real people impact. Max, thank you again. Jumping in.
Thank you.
First one, Max is there, hand up. But I would like to give again that invitation. If there's things you'd like to hear more about with game-based learning or just real hot topics in the world of learning and development, we'd love to hear from you. We'll be here on LinkedIn Live bi-weekly. If you'd love to come on the show, we'd love to have you here in our offices in London. If you'd like to learn more about game-based learning and what we do here at Attensi, please do. You can pop over to my profile page and book a call with us straight away, or drop me a DM, and I'd love to connect with you in more detail. We'd arrange a short call. We can give you a demo. We can get you playing some games, all the fun stuff that Max talked to today. But thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for everybody that watches record. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon.